Hello, everybody. I remember to unmute myself. That's always a wonderful thing. I am Megan. Welcome to Digital Hammurabi, for those who have not joined us before. Today, we are going to be talking to Luuk Odekerken, and he did coach me before we started on how to pronounce his name. So with any luck, I remembered and I got it right. And he is a recently graduated BA student from the University of Leiden and an Assyriology person, which makes me very happy. And he has very kindly offered to come and talk to us about one of his BA papers in which he wrote about Enheduanna and Inanna Ishtar in the Odekerken period, which is like one of my personal favorite collection of topics, so I'm very psyched at the moment. So Luuk, why don't you go ahead, say hi, tell us a bit about yourself.
So hi everyone, obviously. So I'm basically I'm not technically an Assyriology person. I studied ancient histories of the Middle East. It's like in their general history of the Middle East. So I'm also somewhat versed in Egyptian and the like.
Excellent. It sounds like you probably did an almost identical BA program to me then, because that's exactly what I did for my undergraduate degree.
I just sort of stopped. I sort of specialized sort of informally in Assyriology. I am not an actual Assyrian. There is a specialism called Assyriology, which I didn't take. I am not versed in cuneiform or in. I'm slightly versed. I've had an introductory course to Akkadian, but I'm not a Sumerologist or any or have any specialty in that regard. And I'm mostly interested in like the stories of the ancient Mesopotamian world. Obviously, Gilgamesh is how I got into it. I think Gilgamesh is how everyone gets into it.
Pretty much.
And yeah, that's so that's also what I've been tried to talk about with this paper. It's
excellent.
So I would like to talk about the work I'm presenting today. Hello, everyone. Was my BA thesis. So I'm unlike the people these gorgeous Digital Hammurabi persons usually have on. I am not like a professor or a highly trained. I've just graduated my BA, and please be kind to me.
Everyone is, well, I hope everyone is always kind. If they're not, then we're going to have very strong words. So do not worry about that. And actually, I'm excited to have someone who isn't in the middle of their career to talk about this subject and why they like it and why it's important, because I think it helps to give people like an understanding of the whole spectrum of how Assyriology works and how the university systems work, and I think it's going to be really interesting. So do you want to give us like a brief overview of your thesis maybe, and then we can go from there?
I'll try. I have my thesis here to just as a check.
Just in case.
All right. So yeah, basically my thesis is about Enheduanna, who is a very famous person in the ancient Near East. She was the daughter of Sargon of Akkad, who was a very important king. And she was also installed as the priest of Inanna, the moon god, at the city of Ur in southern Sumeria. And there's very little we actually know about her. There is the so-called disk of Enheduanna, which is a disk which features her personhood and is also where it is written that she is the daughter of Sargon, which is interesting. But there are also two texts which are claimed to be written by Enheduanna. They end with, or they have a sort of "I am Enheduanna" written somewhere in the middle. Which are very interesting texts because they're much later than her actual time of rule. They date from Old Babylonian periods mostly, some 1,000 years later, and they are they're all very interesting. Let's not try to make that too. Let's not get too much into that. The interesting thing is Enheduanna usually writes about Ishtar. That's in those two works, they are about Ishtar mostly. There is, I'll get into more detail later, I think. But this Ishtar, the Ishtar she describes is kind of special. She writes about Inanna, I should say. She does not write about Ishtar. She writes about Inanna. The interesting thing is she describes Inanna as a very violent goddess. Inanna is like responsible for murders and drinking blood and all this sort of horrible, violent stuff, which is sort of conflicting, I think, with Sumerian descriptions of Inanna, where she is still that a bit, but where a much bigger focus is placed on her as a fertility goddess and as a person of sex, fertility, all those good things. And I think I've sort of made my case that this is where we see sort of Inanna Ishtar as we know it in later periods as the goddess of love and war actually emerging. Sort of under Enheduanna, the goddess Ishtar was sort of rebranded as a double deal. I don't think that's entirely accurate, but it's the best I can do at the moment.
No. So that's fine. So, for those who are unfamiliar, Ishtar is the name normally given to this goddess when we're looking at northern Mesopotamia, Akkad, Assyria, that kind of area, and Inanna is usually the southern deity, and tends to be, I think, chronologically speaking, turns up a lot earlier than Ishtar does. But when you get into later periods, they kind of get mushed together. So these two distinct deities take on I think very similar characteristics. Their names can be used interchangeably. And looking at exactly how and when and why that happens is actually A, very difficult, but B, very interesting. And I'm not terribly familiar with, apart from like passing familiarity with Enheduanna's actual, like the output of work that is attributed to her. So it actually had never occurred to me that may be like not quite ground zero for this process beginning, but definitely.
But you can clearly see the process, I think, which I know there are genuine scholars who are opposed to my viewpoints here, so take what I say with a grain of salt.
There are always people opposed to whatever anyone says.
That's true.
And that's one of the fun things about scholarship, is that you look at the evidence and you put your theory forward, and then people are free to say, I don't think that accounts for all the data points, or help you like nuance it or add to it, or sometimes just violently disagree with you. It can be a little interesting sometimes. So do you want to speak a bit about the texts that we have that are attributed to her?
Yeah, I think that would be a good idea. There are two texts that are attributed to her, and there is one text that is sort of that a lot of people attribute to her, but her name isn't under it. So there's a bit. First text is in Mechusha, which is a lady of largest heart, I believe it translates to. In some circles, it's like the most straightforward text we have. It's a hymn to Inanna, written from Enheduanna's viewpoint, where she sort of asks for help in some case. Unfortunately, the exact case in which help is required isn't present. That one has been broken. But she needs help, and therefore she prays to Inanna, whom she describes as an extremely violent and a violent goddess, with certain characteristics, but which are, I think, very Akkadian. There's not that much to say about that text, except that it describes Inanna in a new light. Then there is the big one, Nin Meshara, which you probably have heard of. It's a rather important text because it's once again it's a hymn to Inanna by Enheduanna, who calls for the help of Inanna to remove Lugal-Ane, I think he's called. He's a local usurper king who has risen up against the Akkadian Empire, and she asks for the help of Inanna to sort of drive him out and to restore basic order to the to the city of Uruk, which is, for thousands of reasons, an extremely interesting text. But the most important thing is that is what happens in that one. It's also impossible to read, I found. Even with translations, it just sort of jumps. There are 3 cities that it mentions, and it never tells you when it jumps from city to city. So there are many different explanations for a lot of it. The third text, which does not necessarily mention Enheduanna, but I get those two names mixed up a lot of the time. It gets
Understandable.
The third text is the myth of Inanna and Ibich. I don't know if you have told us that one. It's on your channel.
I think it's on there somewhere. It's one of my personal favorites.
It is a great text. It was the reason I wanted to do this was because I liked the story of Inanna and Ibich. This again is a Sumerian text that describes Inanna destroying a certain mountain range with her typical sort of what I'm going to call Akkadian Ishtar vibes. She's very violent. She's very angry constantly. Yeah. And she destroys a region which is close to the city of Assur in the north of. It's actually been located because of its relationship to rivers. We actually know Ibich was not just a mythical mountain that happens to be able to bow down to her for some reason, but it was also an actual place, an actual mountain. Which this is kind of interesting in itself because like Ninmeshara, the text about the revolt, here we see the texts of what I'm going to call Enheduanna in sort of a current Akkadian political light. If so we have her talking about the revolt of the Great Revolt, and we also have her talking about what is likely an Akkadian campaign during the time of Naram-Sin as well, which are very interesting. I think that's those are the three things.
It's also not, and I'm speaking entirely off the cuff and could be very incorrect. I don't think bringing political situations into what a kind of almost liturgical text is something that happens terribly often. You have
not that often. It's yeah, sorry, go ahead.
No, you have Josh wrote his PhD thesis on liturgical laments from the Old Babylonian period, and they're very generic and general and talking about the destruction of cities, but without it actually being a specific destructive event. More of a if we are destroyed, then we will weep and the goddess will have left us. So it's quite rare that you have this very specific. You can locate a text with such specificity into an historical event.
Yeah, but which is fascinating in itself, which is why I sort of link them together, which is one of the reasons I think you can sort of call Enheduanna responsible for that text, or at least you can make the case that it's from a similar background.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you. So something that I've always been told, and again I haven't done personal research into this, so this is very much received wisdom. Something I've always been told is that Enheduanna's presence in southern Mesopotamia was very much a political move on the part of Sargon. And for those who are not familiar with Sargon, this is the very first Sargon we know from history. He was a usurper king from the north who kind of took over the northern territories and then invaded the south, unifying, we think for the first time in history, north and southern Mesopotamia, which is then like split apart and then reunified for several hundred years under different empires and different kings. So it's often referred to as the First World Empire, which is really cool in and of itself. But that he installs his daughter in one of the primary political religious positions in the south. It seems to have been like a not only an honoring of the city itself, so this city is so amazing, the religious tradition is so great, we have to have a woman of high prestige in this position, but it also puts a family member in power in a territory that is probably not going to be terribly favorable towards their new overlords, which always struck me as quite a savvy thing to do, actually quite smart.
It was, and I think you're very accurate. This is the same thing I've sort of written, I've worked on. So yeah, there is a bit of debate whether the function of N priestess of Ur is something that was specifically created. I'm all right. Sorry.
Yeah.
That was my computer flashed an error message. Excuse me. I'm not sure if it was something that was specifically created by Sargon himself. There's a bit of debate on that, but it may not have been an ancient institution to put the king's daughter in a sort of high priestess functions. But there are several very interesting religious meanings to it. There is sort of Enheduanna was considered the wife of the god of the city, which also gave her sort of the opportunity and the chance the legitimacy to speak on behalf of the city, because the city is the god of the city. There's which is very interesting phenomenon. Everything is interesting, isn't it?
It is. It's one of the fantastic things about this field. It's just all interesting. Even when you get into like accounting reports, which don't sound like they should be interesting, they can, if you gather enough of them together, they can tell you something interesting about how the economy worked. Sometimes it's just 2 sheep, 1 goat, and then you want to shoot yourself. But that's probably just me, though. There are many people who enjoy reading about sheep and goats.
Well, that was the only time I got to work with real clay tablets. It was just the most boring tablets in the world, and I was just like, these are ancient. I'm so fascinated.
They're super cool, and because of how small they are, they tend to be the best preserved. And then you get these like long, big literary texts that are mostly broken. You might have like 5 lines out of a whole text that you can read, and you're like, no, this is beautiful poetry, I really want to read this. And you're like, no, just sheep and goats.
And bushels of wheat, of course.
Exactly, and some beer and various bits and pieces. So were you able to, do you think, come to any conclusions in your work that maybe are new or different to what is often talked about? I know this can be difficult to do with early research, so sorry.
I don't think I've really come up with anything groundbreakingly new, but I do think adding Inanna and Inanna to the repository of Enheduanna texts is, I think, the most daring and bold thing I've done during this thing, because it's based on there are sort of some, you can sort of use that to put I think it paints, it has not been done a lot, and it paints sort of a more clear picture of indeed the political importance of a figure such as Inanna, someone who of Enheduanna, damn it, and also of Inanna, by the way. You can sort of see in both those last 2 texts that I discussed, both about the revolt and about the attacking the mountain, that Inanna Ishtar could really be used as a sort of manifestation of the Akkadian army. I think Inanna and Ibich is propaganda from some sort. It sort of describes sort of the goddess as marching to a certain location, which refuses to oblige with its plans, and then just sort of utterly destroy it and build its own and works there. I think you can just sort of replace Inanna with the Akkadian army very easily, remarkably easily, something which I think is often very, very contentious.
I'd never considered it like that, and it certainly has precedent in Mesopotamian culture and artwork, because there's an object called the Stele of the Vultures, which you're probably familiar with, Luke, which is a large, I think, limestone stele that depicts a conflict between 2 cities. On one side, it's got kind of like the secular experience. You've got the king and the armies, and then on the other side, you have the divine religious experience, in which the 2 city gods of the 2 city gods were actually fighting each other while that same war was happening. So there's definitely a conception of the gods in the city, that they are the deity of, being very much one and the same thing. And the Stele of the Vultures shows that this god 𝀭Supp, who was victorious, the reason that his city won was because he was able to overpower the opposing god of the other city. So it's definitely not out of the realm of possibility.
I was not aware. I never really looked at the back half of the Seal of Vultures, to be honest. It's always very hard to look at. I know that the Anzu bird is on it for some reason, which is my favorite mythological character.
Anzu bird is awesome, and he's there because in some periods he's kind of like 𝀭Supp's sidekick. All right. So after the whole kerfuffle with which myth was it? 𝀭Supp killing the Anzu bird after he stole the tablet or Ninota. Yeah, I get confused when they change their names, but yeah, the two get associated quite strongly. And we've had a couple of questions, so I think we can take a quick break and look at those. If you do have questions for Luuk, then please put them in the side chat. Just tag @DigitalHammurabi so I see them. We have a couple of people commenting about my son because he said his first word in a live stream on Saturday.
Congratulations on that. I noticed.
Which was adorable. So thank you all for your kind words with regards to that. Lisa for Truth is asking, where does Asherah fit in with regards to Ishtar and Inanna? I honestly am not 100% sure. I have never looked at Asherah as a deity. I'm 90% sure she turns up a lot later, but is often argued to be related to somehow Ishtar and Inanna.
That's true. There is sort of there is a problem where all female gods are sort of just collectivized under the characteristic of femaleness.
Yes.
Sort of it's called, I think, in feminist theory, it's called the Smurfette syndrome, where everyone has sort of, this is the big one, and this is the bearded one, and this is the girl. That's just her characteristic, which I think is a very fun analogy. But that in that way, sort of Inanna Ishtar certainly was formative in the creation of Asherah, because it was just a very important female figure. But I think there's also a case to be made that sort of Egyptian goddesses like Hathor or something, which I'm not too expert on, but I think it's just a big melting pot of a lot of characteristics.
And the thing with Asherah is she's a like a Levantine Syrian coastal deity, I think, and someone tell me if I'm wrong on that, because I could very easily be wrong. But yes. So we know that region had contact with Egypt and with Mesopotamia. There was trade going on, there was diplomacy going on, there was like the movement of peoples quite extensively. So there definitely was this contact, and there was this kind of like mixing up of cultures and ideas and concepts. So it's entirely possible that she kind of grew out of all of the different female divinities that were being imported into the area at that time. But yeah, I can't tell you anything more concrete than that, I'm afraid. So Magnus Thirup Hansen is asking, how important was Ishtar to the Akkadians?
Extremely. It was that's sort of, it's
the best answer you can give.
Just ultra important. She was responsible for they say she was responsible for everything, but they also state that Anu and Enlil were responsible for absolutely everything. But in case of Ishtar, she was the city god of the Akkadians, and she's also sort of very strongly connected personally with the gods of with the kings of the Akkadian Empire. I think, there is the Sargon legend, which literally disclaims how she marries him, I think.
I'm not sure she marries him. I think she...
no, you're right.
Doesn't a priestess... I think he writes that a priestess of Ishtar raises him, and then the goddess falls in love with him and then makes him king.
Yeah, and protects him from...
it's described as a very, very personal relationship. And you see that carried forward into the Neo-Assyrian period as well. So a slightly different area. It's not Akkad anymore, it's Assyria, but she's still immensely important. And you see the kings in inscriptions and in hymns and prayers kind of attributing their success to her. They say that she raised them up, she sat them on her lap. It's like all of their success is attributable to her and to Ashur, who's the city god of Assyria. So yeah, she's one of those. She kind of pops up and stays around for a while.
Yeah, she's also very important. I think she brings fertility and rains, among other things. She's just basically the one you congratulate when things go right, or the one you thank, I should say.
Yeah.
But for example, the mythical text "The Curse of Akkad," which has very little historical basis, but is still a very interesting thing. This explains how sort of the fall of the Akkadian Empire was later contributed to Ishtar abandoning the city, and therefore sort of all the grace she gave to that empire disappearing with her. Mm-hmm. So I think the Akkadians really believe that Ishtar is maintaining a happy Ishtar is of vital importance to maintaining our empire.
Yep. And that's not rare or unusual for the region. So someone commented that it seems like Ishtar is the goddess of all cities ever. She's not quite. She's important to most places. Her specific city, she had see, I don't want to say that because then you get like Inanna of Uruk and Inanna of Sippar, and you get all these different local goddesses in later periods being called Ishtar or being called Inanna, and kind of syncretized with the main Ishtar.
Yeah, that's a very difficult discussion to reach, but still I think those are important. I think Inanna of Uruk is very not a violent goddess, at least originally. Mm-hmm. There is there's the myth of Inanna and Enki, where she is on a boat and she's attacked by all these monsters that Ea, the god of wisdom, or Enki, the god of wisdom, throws at her, and she sort of cowers and lets her servants do all the fighting, which is, I think, very unlike the extremely warlike Ishtar you see in
like the later texts and
text. And that's also, those are specifically to Ishtar of Uruk. So I think that's part of my thesis, is the extreme difference in early stages between Ishtar of Akkad and Inanna of Uruk. Mm-hmm. Because Ishtar of Akkad has very, very, very specific, interesting personality traits. She's also like half a male deity. She has a lot of sort of characteristics of reversal. She makes the high low, she makes the poor rich, and vice versa. Which are all very, I've never found them in Sumerian literature, so I may be wrong about this.
I can't think of anything off the top of my head. In Sumerian, Inanna tends to be, like, you see her a lot in the love lyrics, and like Inanna and Abik. And then I was going to say Gilgamesh, but I'm not sure she turns up in the Sumerian Gilgamesh legends. But no, she seems to. She actually does. Oh, fantastic.
But she isn't that. I don't know enough about it, but she does occur. That's,
So the feeling I get, and again, without having done research, this is just my general feeling, having read a massive metric ton of Akkadian and Sumerian literature. The feeling I get is that Inanna tends to be more like this petulant daughter figure who like stomps her foot and gets angry when she doesn't get her way, and destroys mountains. But like Ishtar is very much this martial character, who kind of gathers everything, like all dichotomies are kind of gathered into her. They're interesting.
That is very true. But you just mentioned the destroying of mountains, which I think is one of the most Ishtar-like things. I think you've talked about, you mean Inanna and Ibich when you say stomps on mountains, but I think that's a very Ishtar. I know she's called Inanna in that myth, but I think she is very much the personality of Ishtar.
I would agree. I think the way she does it, like getting the bull from Arn, and like I'm so upset they've insulted me so much, I'm going to trample you with the bull of heaven. I know it, and again, completely just how I feel. Oh, we have another question. Is the Akkadian Ishtar where you get the possibly queer Gala priest and priestesses?
Yes, she is.
Yeah,
I think so. I'm not sure if, I don't think there is a Sumerian precedent for that, but
so Gala is a Sumerian word, and you do get Gala priests, I think, in Sumerian. I'm not sure. Josh is going to tell me when he gets home, I'm sure. But I think the gender question is usually found in the Akkadian material rather than the Sumerian. and I don't have the specific text in my mind at the moment. This is a thing I actually do need to do a video on, because it's a very interesting question, and it pops up in a couple of places. Yeah, so that needs some more investigation so I can speak more eloquently on it. So, Luuk, before we move on, is there anything about what you've been working on that you'd like to go into a little bit more?
I'm sorry, you've just frozen for me. I don't know what your question was.
I said before we move on to the next kind of line of questioning, is there something else that you wanted to talk about from your thesis?
I don't think so. I think...
Excellent. Well, I did want to ask you what your plans are moving forward, because you've just graduated, you said a week ago, so congratulations. That must feel fantastic. What are you planning next?
It does seem it does sort of feel fantastic, but I'm also sort of saddened. It's been a great few years, and I'm very afraid to say I'm probably going to sort of I'm not going to do an MA. Unfortunately, I think I'm not really the scientist type, and I think I would love to sort of spend more time in this wonderful Assyriology paradigm, but I'm sort of more out to look for popularizing, like less extremely scientific,
more general, sharing more general information with people.
Yeah, I think sort of one of the things that I personally find a bit off-putting about the scientific working in science is that you have people spending their whole lives sort of working through like old Assyrian archives or the like, and there is certainly some fun that can come of that, but in the end, you sort of your magnum opus is something that 99.9% of humanity just
will
really
never read. Yeah.
Well, I think there's a lot of sort of interesting history, including Enheduanna, obviously, which is very interesting for the general public and under sort of and not properly communicated to them. I think a lot of people will find this interesting. And well, I would like to further my case in communicating it to them.
I think that's absolutely fantastic. It's one of the reasons why we started this channel, because we love it. We love Mesopotamia, but no one really knows about it. And it's not taught in British schools. I was very surprised moving to America to find that middle school children do learn about Mesopotamia. My 12-year-old did it last year. But it's not like Egypt. It's not like Greece and Rome. There isn't this almost cultural knowledge or understanding or even awareness of the massive amount of history and culture that there is. And I think trying to bring that to people is a fantastic plan.
That's absolutely true. I really noticed the depth of this problem after I read Gilgamesh for the first time, because I learned almost nothing about Mesopotamia. My history curriculum on high school was basically so there is the prehistory times, and then sort of the Greeks came. And I really was sort of unprepared for the the millennia between those two periods.
Yes, I had a very similar experience. We did do Egypt. I remember quite clearly doing Egypt.
We did him. There was like in our textbook like a minuscule section which basically said there was this guy called Akhenaten, and he liked to be painted in a certain way. Other Egyptians did not like that. That's sort of
the end. That's the whole of Egyptian history.
Yes.
Yes, I think we did Egyptian and then skip forward to the classics, which is just
it's such a shame. I think it also sort of reinforces this, I think, a bit too Western centric.
I think it definitely does, and I suspect that's why it happens, because the people putting the curriculum and the textbooks together, at least in the UK, tends to be people who did classics at college. It really formed the core of who they are, and it's the backbone of the British. Yeah, it definitely is. But it's the backbone of the British education system, which is great. But there's a lot of history out there that predates Greece and Rome, that fed into Greece and Rome, that I think it's really important to share with people.
Certainly, it's. I'm hoping to have an interview for a job at the Dutch Museum of Antiquities in a few weeks.
That's exciting.
So I'm hoping I can fulfill that dream of sort of popularizing Mesopotamia a little bit, but we'll see. That's
well, that sounds absolutely fantastic. Chat, if you have any more questions for Luuk, now is the time to get them in. Someone's talking about aliens. We're not going to talk about aliens. I'm very sorry, everyone. Don't do aliens.
Just before coming here, I watched an episode of Ancient Aliens. I have lost more faith in humanity again.
And I feel bad because I find the show is very entertaining. It's very entertaining. But until YouTube, I never realized that people actually take it as fact. And then I found that it was very sad because the truth is much, much more interesting.
I just keep shouting citation needed at
Good
because
man.
I really think some of those stories they tell are kind of interesting, and I would like to know where they came from, but they never do.
Well, yes, I would like to know that. And going through, we went through Zecharia Sitchin's first book, The 12th Planet, and you can kind of trace some of what he's saying back to the original mythology, but it's very clear based on my understanding of Sumerian that he did not know the language or did not know it as well as he thought he did. But he never gives citations. He never says, this is what I'm quoting. He just puts a block of text in there with his wonky translation, and then you're supposed to just trust on faith that he's translated accurately. And then you get people talking about like the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. I'm like, they don't exist at all. Not even a little. Yeah, so...
As I'm apparently here as an Inanna expert, she did not have a space helmet. I would like to point this out now.
Excellent. Thank you for pointing that out. Someone needed to hear that. Okay, so we do have 2 final questions. Banana Jr. asks if the pyramids were by aliens. Nope. Or at least using alien technology. Also nope. Magnus Thurup Hansen, do we have any indications of philosophy in Mesopotamia?
That is a very excellent question, and I am not versed in philosophy at all. I would recommend you read Mark van der Meeroop's book Philosophy in the Ancient Near East. I think it's called Before the Greeks. Excuse me.
There we go.
And that tells me much more than I could possibly tell you.
See, we provide information and citations so you can do your own research. Oh, and one last question before we close out. Jonah Epstein. When looking into Inanna Ishtar before the syncretism, I'm finding much on Inanna, but I'm having trouble finding more on the Ishtar components, origins, pre-conflation. Yes.
Yeah, that's part of the problem that sort of before... I think writing comes from the Sumerian region, so there is very little knowledge of the actual Akkadian Empire, which I would posit is sort of the Semitic region that became Akkadian later. There's very little writing from that before they conquer the south, so before the syncretism happens. So yes. There are a few things actually. There is, I think it's Louis Sprague's work. He has a very small article called Ishtar where he describes it as a Semitic male war god in some region or other. I'm not sure. But yeah, very, very few actual tablet cuneiform attestations.
Exactly. That's really all there is to it. Writing starts in the south and then spreads north, so we don't have that early record of the north that we have the south. And we also have a problem where we haven't found Akkad yet. So the capital of the Akkadian Empire is still missing. I mean, presumably it exists. Presumably we'll find it one day if it hasn't been flooded or something. But we don't know where it is. So we're missing all of the records, all of the literature, really everything from the capital and from the northern half of the empire. Yes. So we cannot help you, sadly. This is a problem with the field. Things are kind of a bit scattered. But I have no more questions. Luuk, thank you so much for joining us. This was absolutely wonderful. And best of luck with your interview.
Thank you.
Let us know how it goes.
I will. And I will see you. I will see you in your next live stream when I'm on the other end of the camera. Bye.
Oh, and while I have everyone here, I'm going to be away. So we're in the process of moving house. You'll have noticed that our output has decreased a little bit. That's because rather than spending time working on videos, I'm packing. You can see the boxes in the background. So we will be back. We are still here. Just bear with us for a little while. Thank you everyone for joining us. This was very enjoyable. I hope you had fun. We will see you again soon. And until next time, resist poor scholarship. Always ask, how do you know that?